Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lower Makefield Township Ad Hoc Property Committee meeting of November. It's November 18th. My name is Dennis Stedman. I'm the chair of this committee, and I'd like to call this meeting to order. We have a guest presenter today who will be introduced a bit later, but at this point, I would ask the committee members as well as our Board of Supervisors representatives to please introduce yourself. And we'll start with you, Bet, since you're in the northwest corner, at least on my screen. Hopefully
Hi, I'm Bet Sovany. I am a member of the committee and I am the secretary.
Hello, Jim Scott.
John Moen.
Ed Childs, I'm at vice chair.
James Nyes. I'm the liaison from the historical committee.
Great. All right. With that, let's get underway. I'm going to challenge myself by sharing a screen. Please, if you could let me know, can you? Does everyone see this first page of a PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
Great. So at tonight's meeting, we have certainly a full agenda. I know not everyone can stay for the entire meeting, but we appreciate all the time that everyone has. The first order of business is approval of the meeting minutes from October 4th. Bet, our secretary, would you like to take that item?
I'll make a motion that they be approved.
Second.
Who seconded?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, or wave. Thank you. All right, appreciate that. The minutes are approved. Just in terms of kind of level setting for us, as Sarah said, we haven't necessarily seen each other in the most as it met as a full team here for a while. But a quick summary of activities. Tonight we have a presentation by Helen Hines here coming up shortly, who will talk to the historical significance of the 4 houses that are part of this assignment that the property committee has for individual homes. And this is the beginning of recording that process and really digesting that history. It's not the end. I'm sure we'll have a lot of follow-up for Helen, and the historical commission is represented by James. Also, just a brief update. As you all know, we've asked Spaziano Real Estate to conduct some value analysis, some real estate property analysis to try to get some objective numbers in terms of market value. Not that that drives all these decisions. There's many considerations beyond market value, but the financials are a part of this analysis. And they have met, and we have met with them. We've toured with them the 2 houses in question, the Slackhouse at the Makefield Highlands Golf Course, as well as the Satterswaith house there at Patterson Farm off of Mirror Lake Road. We had a preliminary meeting with Spaziano Real Estate today. Bet and Fred joined me and our township manager, Kirk, to hear some of their initial thoughts and discussions. It's interesting. They will be providing a more detailed report in the future, so I don't want to get buried into some of their details on those 2 houses right now, other than to report that element of this project is advancing and advancing well. Also, we're going to discuss executive summary document that Bet has taken leadership on in terms of really putting down in black and white the potential new uses that we see for these various properties. And that'll be coming up later. After we complete those three elements, then I'd like the committee to come back and we'll discuss not only the current situation, but also potential next steps and activities. Of course, we'll have an open forum for other business from the committee and ask for any public comment. So that's our agenda for the evening. What I'd like to do now, because I know our expert, historian expert, Helen Hines, has said she's prepared an hour's worth of material for our 30-minute presentation. Helen chairs the Lower Makefield Township Historical Committee. Helen, I won't do justice to all of your credentials and background, but I'd like to turn the floor over to you and ask you to give the committee just a thumbnail of your bio, and then we want to learn more about the historical significance of these four homes, these four houses that are part of this assignment. So with that, Helen, I'll turn it over to you. Do you want to share screen?
Yeah,
Dennis, you'll have to stop screen.
Yeah, you have to.
I'm doing that now.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. My bio. Let me see. I attended the University of Pennsylvania and married, and my husband went off to Cornell, so I followed him, and unfortunately did not finish until 1995. But I did finish. Graduated in psychology, and at that point, really loved history and decided to go into history. So I started a master's program at Penn, but very quickly switched over to a master's program at Temple and finished my PhD in early colonial American history in 2008. So yeah, the only thing I missed was doctor, which I'm sure Fred enjoys as well. But it is neat, and it took me a long time to get, and I'm very proud of actually finishing that dissertation, 432 pages of it. But anyway, so I've been also interested in Lower Makefield history from the time we moved here in 1984. Got into the Historical Society almost right away with Florence White, and eventually became president of that society. Also, she encouraged me to join the Historic Commission, which I did in 1986. So over the years, I've been various parts on that, but now I'm currently chairman of the Historical Commission, and we need more members, so I'll put that in there. I'm starting the presentation with the Slackhouse. Interesting that you should say that. And this is our early map, which Ralph Thompson and I actually did for a project that the township supported in 1992. We went and found the original grants of all the original grantees to Lower Makefield Township. Got the information from the PHMC, and I was at the time an archivist at the Bucks County Historical Society, so I was able to kind of feed him a lot of things. So we managed to do it. We managed to create this basically off of a 1798 tax list working backwards, and found where these original grant lines were. And you'll notice that many of them are along township roads. and this map, which we got the township to actually fund and sell, actually kind of shows that. So we see that basically this road down here is the Newtown Road, right where the exit is, and that is right along a grant line. And many of these early grants follow these grant lines. So William Yardley's grant and John Clow's grant, they basically go up Quarry Road, and Pownell's grant goes up Woodside Road. So this is Woodside Road, so Quarry Road, Woodside Road. We superimposed this map on a map of Lower Makefield Township in 1992. So this is the Darlington Road that goes up this way through these grants. So starting with the Slackhouse is on the original Thomas Bond grant. Ralph did not like genealogy very much, so he really didn't do a lot of that research, but I did. And Thomas Bond's daughter actually married Charles Reed of Philadelphia. So she got this grant. Charles Reed acquired it by marriage. And in order to separate it out to his three children, he basically split it into three pieces and sold, or basically willed each piece to each of his three children, one a woman, which is interesting because that's the way that certain Quakers did things, and Reed was one of those. So these people really didn't want to come and live in Lower Makefield. They were city people in Philadelphia, and they immediately tried to sell each piece. And the one that sold first was this one along the front. And it was sold to a man named George Logan, who was a blacksmith. We don't know precisely where this line falls. At one point, it would be on Makefield Highlands. On another point, it would be just off Makefield Highlands. The third piece was purchased fairly fast too, and that was on the west side of Dolington Road. So this whole piece goes in. So I'm not sure, but this might actually be on the middle piece. The Makefield Highlands might actually be on the middle piece. However, Logan's got the end piece, and there are at least two properties on that end piece that could be Logan's original house. And we try not to offend owners of properties that maybe their house isn't as old as they thought. But Logan actually lived there and had a blacksmith shop somewhere along Taylorsville Road. And as I said, there's two potential houses that it could be. He placed his indentured servant in the house and then died. The indentured servant married his widow, had children of their own, and in 1767, they sold this entire piece, this entire piece to Abraham Slack, who was part of a huge chain migration of Dutch settlers coming from New Jersey and New York that moved into the upper areas of our township. So we get the Slacks and the Van Sants and the Van Horns and all of these Dutch. Northampton Township gets Holland, but they basically settle here. They're mostly Presbyterians. In 1767, they're already clearly not supporting the British government, and that goes on. So one of the things that's interesting about this end piece, and which really kind of gets us all going, is that there is a local story, legend, and it is that this is the other house that it could be, and then this is what I think is Abraham Slack's house. The story is that one of the Slacks rode Washington across on Christmas Day, 1776, and his name was James Slack, and he had a son, Timothy, a young teenager who went with him. Now, at any given point in the 1770s, there were three James Slacks. So which James Slack, living on the same piece of land, was the one that rode Washington across? So if you owned one of these houses, you'd be trying to do that. Now, Abraham lived in this one in 1767, so it's clearly not him. But this is one of the possible candidates. It's either this or the first house that I showed you before. They both had James Slack. This one was actually the middle portion of that grant purchased by John Slack. And this piece was given to his son Thomas to farm around 1769. So we suspect that this part of the house is 1769, has a fairly large chimney fireplace, but that is a rebuild from the 1920s. There's some odd shapes on the front which show that there probably was a window here, another window, and a door. If we go around the back of the house, we can see the same sort of layout as the previous house that I had up here. You see this house? So this was Abraham Slack's old house. He built this section after he purchased. If this was Logan's house, this is Abraham Slack's house. There was a date stone under this window when I first moved into town, because I remember working for this lady, giving her the history of her house. And the date stone said John Ashton, 1767. And the John Ashton was spelled with the printer's SH, so it looked like AFTON, which is why I constantly argue that he was a mason and he built walls and He lived at the end of Quarry Road, so he was near the quarry, and he probably built the little pond for Thomas Yardley about the same time. And it was called Ashton's Pond until someone decided to change the SH to F. That makes much more sense to me as to why we have Lake Afton in Yardley than some poet from the end of the 18th century. But anyway, I digress. So this house, we suspect, could be, this section could be the house that Thomas owned in 1775. He died just before that, or just after that point, and his son James had been living with him, and son James already had a son Timothy. So this is the only one that has that pedigree that goes back to a James and a Timothy descended from John Slack. John Slack has the house is on Quarry Road, where the cemetery is, with the Presbyterian minister in the cemetery. He's there because he married John Slack's daughter. And he is one of the founders of Princeton University. So I'm not sure that they know where he's buried, but that's where he is. Okay, so I did a little close up so you can see the stonework has obviously been messed around, and you can see a line, pretty clear line here for what probably was a door. Going around to the back of the house, so this section would be more early 19th century. And this section is clearly late 19th century, 20th century. But here's the back of that house. So we have basically 3 bays, the same windows. The windows are unique. They're 9/6. And that's a Slack characteristic. All the Slack houses have 9/6 windows. A couple more things I'd point out about the back is this huge well. After James Slack shows up on our 1798 tax list as owning this property at that point, he leaves it to his son Cornelius, and don't ask about the Corneliuses. There are 5 Cornelius Slacks at any given time. But in his will in 1856, he says that this well is to be open to all friends and neighbors because it is a never failing well, which is really kind of interesting. The golf people were interested in that when they were drilling. I say, why didn't you use the well? But anyway, and then this is the other side. There was a date stone, but it is no longer legible or there. The actual stone itself is missing. However, the estimate is around 1767, 68 for this piece, which is when Thomas would have acquired it. All right, and then right across from the parking lot is this little cute little barn. I would say if any use is going to be made out of this property, that this end of the parking lot needs a Quaker shed for cars to park. Otherwise, they're going to be bombarded with golf balls. But it really could be an interesting property. So that's the controversy about this house. We have a complete chain of title for this house. After Cornelius sold it, he sold it to the Lovett family of Langhorne. It was owned by the Lovetts through most the rest of the 19th century, and it was purchased by the Perry family, another very wealthy family in Langhorne, and they probably did the additions to the kitchen, etc. I'm going to go back and look at that kitchen. Okay. This kitchen addition is amazing because it has not only a door here, it has a door over further. There's an entrance to the old room downstairs, a very large living room on grade, which very few colonial houses have entries on grade. This is amazing. And it really could be an excellent entertainment space, in my opinion. All right. Dalkowitz purchased it in the early 1950s, and Dalkowitz, I did some research on him, and he was a trainer / football coach from Princeton University. He had a private plane, he had a club with local neighbors. He loved to entertain, he was very athletic, so he installed this fabulous 1950s style stainless steel and red vinyl kitchen in the house, complete with an indoor barbecue grill and all kinds of things that, if carefully restored, could be absolutely spectacular. You have to like that kind of stuff, 50 stuff. The house has over 5 bathrooms, which is another really unusual thing about colonial houses. And these bathrooms are tile from the 50s in green and blue, and it's just amazing again, with a careful plumber, could make it spectacular and very interesting as a I think, a B&B. All right, this is another Slack just for your reference. So you see the 9/6 windows. Again, an older section, and then an addition. These houses all have tons of additions as the families changed through the centuries. And this is the final Slack house. This is one Abraham Slack Jr. house off of Dolington Road. All right, so this is our map from 1798, and we have Abraham Slack here. You see James is farming not only his own property, which seems to be where the golf course is, but also across the street. 140 acres, and Cornelius is next to him, and Abraham Slack is next to him, and off Dolington Road, this is Dolington Road, that bisects Dolington Road, and we have, this is the Garden of Reflection. Just to orient you. All right. I think with the golf course proximity, this house makes an ideal candidate for an Airbnb with a live-in apartment for a manager. It goes all the way up to the 3rd story. It's one of the only colonial houses I've ever been in that has a bathroom in the 3rd story and a bathroom in the basement. That just doesn't happen. And closets in every room. That doesn't happen either. I think it should be the Makefield Highlands Tea House and Spa with 1776 lounge and patio opening soon for breakfast and tea parties. Other than TLC restoration skills and starter capital, the other necessity is the covered just shed, Quaker shed, to fit the vehicles, and possibly a screen on the back patio to make that useful. Another possibility would be a 20-year plus long conservatorship with someone living in the property. It would have to be administered by township management or delegated to one of its commissions, and a reduced rent would be balanced by a schedule of required maintenance tasks and improvements to be taken on, or at least partially paid for by the leasee. All right, now we're going to move to the Patterson Farm. All right, so here's what we have. 3 residences, 3 large hay barns, 1 greenhouse ruin, multiple outbuildings for crop storage, etc. Property is, this is the point, is already certified eligible for National Register. I actually helped write the last National Register nomination and with Jeff Marshall, and it was rejected because the committee decided that since we were putting it up not on the basis of who lived in the houses or anything like that, but on the basis of a continuity of agriculture, that we needed to do more work on the uses of historic agriculture on the property, what kinds of things were actually grown. So that is why it didn't go through. Otherwise, it should sail through. It has 2 springs, a seasonal stream, woodlot, etc., and multiple fields of statewide agricultural significance, which I'm sure you've seen the Penn State agricultural map for the Patterson Farm, although I did not include it. All right, so here we go. Now we're talking about Thomas Janney, and you see him on this. This is again, the Grant map, and Thomas Janney has this very strange configuration of 720 acres, and then this long, thin strip that goes all the way out to the river. And that is a little odd. And above him is Richard Vickers and Salmon Overton. This is the Newtown Road. So the current buildings would be in here. Prickett's would be over here. And there are other old houses along this stretch that could be Thomas Janney's house. That's one of the big questions, is we have no idea where Thomas Janney lived. And he clearly lived here. He was a provincial councilor. Richard Huff's house is on Moyer Road. That's very visible. There is an old house currently in Yardley Hunt. That's a very tiny little building. I'll show it at the end. It's called the Stillwell House. No one knows how old that is. That could possibly be Thomas Janney's original property. I had originally thought that it was the caretaker's house at Patterson Farm next to the AOY building, but it cannot be, because there is a deed from 1696 when Thomas Janney went back to England to minister to Quakers that gave this very odd configuration, 16 purchase by 20 purchase by 16 purchase by 20 purchase, to a man named Thomas Tuncliffe and his son John. All right, so then we have to delve into Pennsylvania history. Who the heck is Thomas Tuncliffe? Thomas Tunnicliffe was a squatter, and he was living on the Vickers Grant when Thomas Holmes surveyed the original grants. He had been here on a claim from West Jersey from King James, and Penn had made an agreement when he got Pennsylvania that he would honor previous deeds from his king's brother James and from the early Swedish and Finnish settlers to give them title to their land. And they, as most of the other settlers coming over, had to fulfill a three-step process of get a grant, have a survey taken by an official surveyor, and then get a patent on your land. All right, Janney got patents on his land. Janney was a provincial councilor. I said his actual living was earned by being a weaver. And in his inventory in tax list in 1693, he has several sheep. So he's a weaver, but he does a whole lot of politicking. So he kind of gets away from that. But anyway, when he was politicking in 1693, there was also a court case that I found. Because I had a hard time convincing Ralph that Thomas Tunnicliffe actually existed. And there was a court case that came out where Thomas Janney was presiding as judge. And it was a suit brought by Hannah Overton that Thomas Tunnicliffe had abused her. Whoa, that's kind of stunning. What was that about? And it turns out that in the court case, Janney is warning Thomas to please be careful in his way of speech. And it says in the record, and Thomas Tunnicliffe then abused the court. So he basically cussed them out, which Quakers did not agree with. This was a period when Penn's whole land ownership of Pennsylvania was in question because James had become king. And so in Pennsylvania, the courts, the provincial courts, were basically theocracies ruled by Quaker rule. So Thomas Tunnicliffe had violated Quaker rule. The fine was paid by Thomas Janney. What? And then 3 years later, he leaves him this piece of land. So what I think happened was Tunnicliffe's land, he had actually had a grant for 1,000 acres. So he thought his grant went all the way back here. And so he definitely built a house along the river, but he also built a house along the back end of his grant, probably along Stony Hill Road. And, which could be that cabin. And therefore, Thomas Janney, when he was leaving, decided to leave it to him and make sure that he had a legal title to it, which was very kind, but he seemed like a very kind man. That comes back to the Janney family by 1715, but Thomas Janney leaves his 4 sons, and they each have their own houses. Jacob lived in Thomas Janney's house, wherever that was, so he took over Thomas Janney's house, but that still leaves Abel, Joseph, and Thomas Jr. to live someplace on this land, and we have no idea. There is no record of any house along the river for Thomas Janney. As a shepherd and a weaver, he needed open space, so I presume that he was either in the Yardley Hunt structure or on the current farm. And this makes the most sense. I had the opportunity to go to Makefield in 2019 and took several photographs of old cabins, basically one room down and one room up, and they look exactly like this. So it makes sense. So, and this is another thing I thought I'd bring up. This is another proof that Thomas Janney exists, because here you see his earmark. This is his earmark, a hole in the right ear and a short cut in the top ear. You see it right next to John Huff's. And Stephen Steppel Van Sant is already living across the street. It's really kind of interesting. He clearly was here, as was Hannah Overton, even though Ralph did not believe in that. But this is about right. It's faced totally to the south. It's got the right orientation. And when you go into this property, there's a shallow 6-foot cellar underneath, small fieldstone stucco rubble construction. Door and window placement is very interesting. South facing under the hill edge, and young saplings are the first floor joists with the bark still on the trees. Historians can disagree, and so we do, but I think this is the house that he left to Tunnicliffe, the house where he lived we still have not found. Jacob married Richard Huff's daughter, Hannah, and promptly died. So she may have gone back to Huff's house. And that may leave another house where Jacob Huff lived for one of the other brothers. It probably was not as far south as the Huff Grant, if you remember seeing that on the thing. There are some pictures that I took the other day. It's got a little bit of weeds that need cleaning up, but it's not bad. It needs painting. A scout did it about 20 years ago for my husband's troop, actually painted most of the house, and I think it's been pretty well kept up. It's not the original.
Helen, just a question. So the caretaker's house, as we're labeling it, it was, when do you think that was built? What vintage is that?
1696, possibly earlier.
1696.
Which would make it the oldest existing house in Bucks County. It has a corner fireplace right along the typical plan that Penn gave to his first settlers. It's not meant to be a cooking fireplace. It's meant to be a heating fireplace. Your cooking was done outside. If you were not successful outside your house, you didn't make it. So cooking was something that was done outside with a large pot and cold stand, that kind of thing. Okay. And this really looks like one of those very rural cottages.
Thank you.
It's just amazing. But Donna has been wanting to get wood borings to actually find out for sure that would be useful. It's quite cute. This is obviously a much later addition. As I said, this is the corner fireplace. And there is a well on this side right here. This is the well house. So water right at the door, all those things. And the view and that sighting just sort of below the edge of the hill is very typical of the farmers and crofters in Macclesfield, around Macclesfield, which is basically today a very upscale suburb of Manchester. This is the view from the house toward the Johnny Brown house, and Ralph argued that the cottage was an out kitchen. That would be a heck of a long distance to carry food to a main house, and that doesn't make it. And then I have other sort of proof. This is the map that we did for 1798, and look at this. Bingo! 16 purchased by 20 purchased by 16 purchased by 20 purchased. I think we have found Tunnicliffe's house. But they only were there, as I said, till 1715, and Abel Janney took it back. And it's Abel Janney who sells both these parcels out of his brother Jacob's estate. I don't know how he did that, but Abel was very much like his father, except he wasn't so eleemosynary. He was a tight operator. He was, again, provincial councillor, very reelected often to the council. He was also a judge, just a very, very active guy in local politics. And sadly, after he sold these houses, Joseph, I'm going to argue something else, that Joseph lived in the Satterthwaite house. I think Abel lived in the Prickett house. And Abel, because he was going to Newtown all the time. Newtown was the county seat. So he was going to Newtown. I don't think he would place himself way back on Stillwell's. This is Stillwell's house. This is all basically part of the original Thomas Janney property. I think possibly Jacob's house was there, and the original Thomas Janney house might be that house. Again, tiny little thing. I've never been in it, so I couldn't really tell you. But I think Abel's could possibly be the oldest section of Prickett's. And I think Joseph, who was the farmer on the land, the guy that actually farmed this piece while Abel was off politicking, and supported Jacob's family as well as his own, may have lived there. There's another brother, Thomas. Thomas was a blacksmith, and Thomas married a Roland, and we have always discovered that there is a Roland that was on the early tax lists for the blacksmith in Edgewood Village. It's underneath Edgewood Cafe. There is a ruins that is a blacksmith shop. So we suspect that Thomas may have lived here, Junior, not the original. But he's doing blacksmithing. He's not running the farm. The only guy running the farm is Joseph. Joseph dies in 1729, and that's when Abel sells these two properties. One he sells outright to John Brown, and he borrows money from the loan office and then pays it back on profits from other pieces. It's very interesting. Edward Bailey leases it and then eventually pays for it. They both get possession by 1762. And just see, Edward Bailey has 250 acres as compared to John Brown. John Brown, the constable, probably took over Abel's house. Sadly, I don't think AOY is John Brown, the constable's house. He is John Brown Jr. John Brown died in 1754. He's buried in Slate Hill Cemetery. So, and then this particular land gets sold back and eventually bought by the Taylor family. It's over here kind of hovering. They come across and buy this piece. But anyway. Okay, so this is our working map, or our working copy of our map when we were doing the 1798 tax list. So we were piecing together these pieces, and Ralph was saying, "What is this? What is this weird piece?" And I said, "You know, it's 16 purchased by," and he said, "Oh no, you got to be wrong." But you know, we laughed about it, and I think I'm right. I'll leave it at that. Here's the view of your fields, your prime farmland. This is a view to the southwest, some of the most prime farmland in Pennsylvania. And here is the view over toward the ruins of Bright Farm. It was really a lovely day. I loved just taking these pictures. Here's the pack house, which at one time was a residence, but we're not counting that, I guess, as a residence. Going on to the provenance of the houses that are here. Let me see. What happened to the farm was that the Janney family eventually buys it back. And that Jacob's, not his son, but Jacob's grandson actually inherits what's left of the family land in Newtown. Becomes very, very wealthy on the Core Creek property, and ends up buying back the middle portion of his great-great-grandfather's property, his original grant. And so I wanted to kind of show what this is. So this is an aerial photograph from 1937. And you can see at the bottom, this is the Stony Hill Road coming out of Edgewood Village. And on what is now the Patterson Farm, this is actually still part of their property. This is what we imagine to be Jonathan Brown's house in Edgewood Village. This was absolutely demolished by 295 coming in. This is Prickett's. This was another small house, which we think might be Malin Brown's property. There were at least 6 Brown brothers living on this property somewhere. So we think that's Malin's. We think this is Charles. This is a more early 20th century house. This is the current Satterthwaite house. And there is another house up in here, which is Will of the Wisp, which is probably Benjamin and Benjamin's house, which his father gave him permission to build a house on the eastern portion of the farm. So he may have bought there, or he may have built there, or he may have built along Mirror Lakes Road. There's was a frame building along Mirror Lakes Road that was demolished in the early 60s, and he could have built here. I put this in because I was showing you the sort of cadence of windows again in the Patterson Farm. This is Jacob Janney's half that he puts on. This has the date stone, which makes it clear that it's Jacob Janney's. This was probably just a 2-story building until the whole facade was reorganized by the successor to Jacob Janney, who got this property from his father when he bought it back from the Brown family. Okay, so here's the date stone, 1837 to this piece of property. Probably this was just 2 stories, the way so many houses are in Lower Makefield. with an older piece and a newer piece. Jacob Janney bought the house, but he wasn't very good at running a farm and financial management. And he basically, he lost it. There's no other way to put it. He lost it to creditors in 1841, and it was purchased by his kinsman, a relative of his wife, Joseph Yardley, son of Samuel and Richard Yardley, not the William Yardley that was owned the duck farm at this time. But the guy who buys this is Richard Yardley, who had a big mill on the back end of Main Street in Yardley that went down into the mill, a sawmill, etc. He was a cousin of the original Thomas Yardley in Yardley. So it was another Yardley house, and he had deep pockets. So the front of the house gets improved at that point to kind of reflect this new gentility. It's a manor house. It's all unified with a single roof line and a useful third story. Buster Joan told me at one point that when he was a very young man and Joseph was still alive, so Buster was born very early in the 20th century, and he said that he used to work for Joseph Yardley and used to sleep in this wooden hut, which was attached to this section of the house. I don't know why they would have attached it there. I would have thought it would have been here, but he says it was attached there. And Mr. Patterson didn't need it, so he had it removed. That I've never seen any pictures of it. That's just apocryphal, but that is what Buster said. And all of the, I'm looking at the tax list, and it's very clear that the Yardley family has several neighbors' children working for them in the middle of the tax list, and also census document that they're living with them. So teenagers and working the farm with Joseph Yardley. This wall, when I'm looking at this structure, this wall has been greatly modified inside. Again, like the Slackhouse, the central support and a divider has been taken out and made into a lovely center fireplace. So this is probably a Yardley, Joseph Yardley innovation to make it like that. Patterson put the steel in. So there's actually steel supports. This house is probably the best supported house of all these colonial houses. So it's actually can be rated for fire, etc., and for load capacity. More than any of the others. The others are all a little suspect and a little spongy. Again, you can see that what I was saying, that they've basically just unified and made these three dormers. Interesting, this would have probably happened about 1860, right around the time of the Civil War. Yardley actually farmers actually made money on the Civil War coming. And at the same time, across the field, his kinsmen, the Satterthwaites, added a house using almost the same dormers. When we get to that, we'll show that. And here we're going to take a look over at that property. All right, so we have Joseph Yardley's 115, and we have Joseph Satterthwaite's 123, and he is also farming this piece. The two springs are shown. You can see the houses are on this. This has it off. This might be a little off, but this is the 1890 map. And this again is a 1976 map, and you can kind of see what is left. All right, the house has been taken out of Edgewood Village. That's gone. This one is still there. This one is still there. This house is demolished as well. But we have the Satterthwaite Bailey and the AOY, and now Shady Brook, not Shady Brook, Mr. Nadig's house, and what had been Mirror Lakes Farm. So I've come up again, and we're going to argue forever about what the name of this house is. And my vote here is to go back to the original name, which was on a lot of the deeds and maps in the middle of the 19th century, which is Locust Grove. And that makes more sense to me. So instead of calling it the Janney, Bailey, Wagner, Satterthwaite, Doan, Patterson House, Locust Grove makes a lot more sense to me. Okay, so we're going to look at this house. So why did I think that possibly one of the early Janneys lived here? Again, this dividing line was created after Edward Bailey died. this dividing line of this road was created. He farmed this whole thing. And John Brown, Malin Brown, Jonathan Brown are all somewhere else on this property. This is a 1798 tax list. So Edward is farming this whole thing all the way over to the hedgerow against Culpeper and those developments in there. This is the old Vickers Grant. The back of the Vickers Grant, finally Mr. Vickers could never get title. And he goes to Chancellery Court. I didn't finish that story. He goes to Chancellery Court. And by then, it's 2 generations later. It's the grandson of the original Richard Vickers. He's an Anglican bishop, and he has no interest in his land in Pennsylvania. So he sells the back end to Peter Van Sant, and he sells the front end to the Tunkley family. Guess what? They had to pay for it, but they finally got their original grant, and they finally get title to their land. And basically 10 years later, the guy dies. So all the original litigants are long dead when it's finally settled. But this is actually the back of the Vickers Grant. So this is Janney's. And as you can see, Stillwell's house would be right about there, if that's still in the family, which it isn't at this point, because Stillwell has owned it in 1798. But we have a lot of Browns somewhere on that property. Here we have a map from the 1830s. It's pretty sketchy, but it does show us that Cadwalader is in Dave Miller's house. We have Stony Hill Road coming out of Edgewood Village. This is that house that I mentioned got demolished by 295. Satterthwaite is in there. Don't ask me which Satterthwaite that is. Richard Janney and Jacob Janney owned this whole piece, and it's divided. And we couldn't figure out how exactly it was divided because the deeds are not totally clear. There is a sketch, and we have that, which Ralph used, and then, as I told you, to cut out that little piece. And Joseph Satterthwaite has taken over the Bailey property. All right, so again, as you can see, this is just before I-95 comes in. So this is what I call the Bailey house. It doesn't look like much today. On the tax map of 1778 and the accompanying tax list of 1798, he is one of the most taxed people in the township. That means it was a cool house. It was really a big house. Bailey purchased it around 1732. I've been in this section of this house, and unlike its appearance, the wall that's in between this wall and this end of this shed has been taken out. Go around a little bit. Oops. I'll go back to that. All right. This back wall of the house, this lean-to back wall, is stone. That's stunning. When you go in there, it's stone. So how does a stone wall get on this section? This seems to be nailed into something or glued into something, but it makes absolutely no sense structurally. In fact, the stone wall has a walk-in fireplace that is clearly an early 18th century fireplace, possibly 1730s fireplace. So what I think happened is, here's the end of wall. This wall, that end wall, is stone. Whoops, went the wrong way, sorry. And as I said, on the inside, right in here, there is a fireplace. It doesn't show at all on the outside. This fireplace that shows inside the kitchen is buried in the wall. So it's a frame building, the rest of it, except for the stone wall. So if this was an original cabin, like the one that's on the Patterson Farm, and it had a fireplace in the sort of corner edge, and it had log along this front and this front, but it had stone on the other side, it would be about right to be the same kind of cabin. So it could easily be Joseph Janney's. But as I said, I haven't investigated the cellar and what kind of joists are in that cellar, but it is certainly something to speculate on. And I would love another opportunity to go look at it. This as I would say, it was a frame house, state of the art, and Bailey probably built it right after he married in 1735. So I would guess that this was a very early parlor stove. This house was not built to have an indoor fire. This house was actually built with a stove, which is why it was taxed so highly. He also had a servant and a sled, which made him taxed higher than other people. All right, so what happens to this house as it goes on? The Bailey dies, or his son dies. It's left to, let me see, I'm gonna go here and look at this up again to be sure. So the Baileys joined Makefield meeting as it was formed in 1755. The property was passed from father to son, and when Edward II died in 1818, it went to Orphans Court. Thomas Biles was one of the trustees, he and Thomas Yardley actually, and they split the property in two with a farm lane to Mirror Lake to the Newtown Road as a dividing line. So the house was purchased by Martin Wildman, who also owned a house over on Makefield Road at the time. And he bought the western 124-acre piece, which is now part of Patterson Farm. It had a house and outbuildings listed on the deed. The other half of the 126 acres had no structure. So that's where we can recognize that Nadig's house across the street is post-1820. Wildman had severe financial reverses, and he sadly committed suicide by hanging in the carriage house on that property, the one that's got the hole in the roof. Has ghosts. Again, the trustees attempted to sell it since they had held Weidman's mortgage, and they got it back legally. This time it was purchased by William Satterthwaite, who had grown up at the lower end of the township where 5 Mile Woods is, and very wealthy family. And most of the architects agree that the first 3-bay style federal vernacular addition was done by him. So I have to go forward to that piece of it. So there's your Bailey house, possibly your Joseph Janney house, which would have been probably with a ridge going this way and going like that, just a little cabin. And then we get to this half. All right, so I kind of did this on purpose. So it was a 3-bay house with those dormers, and then I put this one in here so you would see the comparison. I find them almost the same, except this is stone. Oops. And this is frame, and it's beautiful. It's Greek Revival, so it's basically got these pilasters that are supposed to remind you of columns. It's flat surfaced butt-ended siding, which is, there's no other house in the township like this except possibly the one up on that has the Christmas trees up off of Darlington Road is somewhat similar, but it's just a lovely kind of addition. So then it stays in the Satterthwaite family for the rest of the century, and we assume that William's son Joseph put on the second edition. Oops, I don't have it. Going the wrong way. There's that notorious carriage house. People were very upset to hear that, but that's what happens. Sorry.
So Helen, excuse me if I could just interject. We're probably 45 minutes into this, and I want to respect the other agenda items as
Yep, I'm almost finished. Almost finished.
This is
almost
very,
finished.
very useful. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, almost finished.
Let's wrap. Okay.
Okay, so my recommendations. I think AOY is keeping the house safe by having people there. There are some worries about the schools on the property for fire safety, etc., and safe waste disposal. There's one major issue with the stone on the west side of the house, which is lacing, because someone used Portland cement, and at some point someone should remove that Portland cement and repoint that house. That will further deteriorate and could result in structural failure if it's not addressed. I'm always worried about interference with the farmer equipment spraying. trucking, offsite parking. Well, we need to do all we can to encourage our farming family to continue doing this to the next generation. Have heard that younger generation wants to experiment with more crop variety, but this is not possible without an operating pack house and possible housing for seasonal pickers. Equipment storage is another issue to be worked out with township management. The Patterson used the pack house for his pickers housing. Bailey Satterthwaite needs repainting to stabilize the wood and prevent extensive replacement. Probing of surface underneath the real structure will reveal whether our guesses are correct. As with most houses, this one needs human presence to stave off animal invasion. Fireplaces, stoves should be reinstalled, woodworking painted, spruced up inside and out. After that, an assessment of locations for modern bathrooms and kitchens can be undertaken to comply with uses identified. Best use would be a conservatorship with a farm family. Perhaps some public meeting space on a limited time basis or location specific might be arranged similar to public meeting space at 5 Mile Woods. A historic conservation volunteer group could offer useful preservation, restoration lessons, fundraisers, training for young people, or any combination of those things. One of the close outbuildings might serve this purpose as well. As to the carriage house and barn, storage. Everywhere in this town, everyone in this township is looking for storage, workspaces to keep boats, antique cars, bikes, etc., especially if they are heated and lit. Rent them out to the highest bidder. No brainer. If the township cannot handle it, they need a part-time property manager. That's it. I will just go through the rest of the pictures.
Thank you.
This is an old house. This is the Richard. Oh, this I put in here just because it was the site, the way the schoolmaster's house when we received it from the Historic Society, and today it looks like this. It is possible. This is the Stillwell house, the house I was referring to that possibly could be Thomas Johnny's original. You see this? The 2-bay and the 3-bay and the single story with an attic above for sleeping. There's another one. This is on Oxford Valley Road. And then, as I said, this is Natick's house, which is clearly 1820s for this section. This is the only other frame building in the township that's anywhere close to the age of the Satterthwaite house, and it's probably in worse condition than the Satterthwaite house. So our frame buildings have not fared very well. If one of the last things Ralph wrote before he died was that he was sad to see that he had not dated the Satterthwaite house properly, and that it was much older than he had thought, and that probably it is the oldest frame house in the township. And some other little houses that townships are proud of, and I'm certainly happy with our township's beautiful Patterson Farm.
Helen, thank you so much. That is a wealth of information. James, I don't know, you're the chair of the historical subcommittee. And so I think it's largely going to fall on your shoulders as to how we best collect and collate the historical significance of these homes into, a black and white report that, that we can use and digest and pass on. And I don't think we'll resolve that on this meeting, in this meeting, but
I'll be happy to send it to him.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that'd be great. If you
I'll
could
send
send
it
it
to
over, because when trying to do research on these houses with what the township initially sent us, I mean, there's different reports from different years,
Right,
have different
right.
dates for all
Right.
the houses.
I collated everything I had, everything from Ralph, everything from my research. I looked at their reports and I collated everything I could to come up with this. So I will be happy to send it to you.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you so much, Helen.
Thank you, Helen. Excellent. Like I said before, I'm sure we'll be coming back for more. This topic isn't
There's
exhaustive.
a lot of potential, and there's a lot of chance, especially with the bicentennial or the centennial, whatever we're calling it, coming up in 2026. That revolutionary connections in Lower Makefield are so amazing, and this farm could be the center part or the Slackhouse could be the center part of a township celebration, reenactment, whatever. I mean, I think that would be awesome.
Right.
And a
Right.
good tourist magnet and everything else.
I hear you. I hear you. Okay. Well,
Okay, well, thank you very much. I'm going to pass out tonight, and thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. We really do appreciate it. So if I could, just to try to get back a little bit, let me let me share screen again and kind of regroup here, just a little bit. As we all know on this committee, these 5 things are the assignment, right? The first one we've checked off. The Board of Supervisors identified which properties are to be addressed. Right now, what we're currently focused on potential uses, because we have to do that in order to establish what kind of preservation efforts, expenses necessary, do the financial reviews, and do the prioritization. So that's our current focus. In that area, we've had discussions with a lot of potential users, including Spirit Golf that runs Makefield Highlands as an event venue. They are very interested in the Slackhouse as a key element to attract special weddings and special events, and a restored Slackhouse would fit into their plans. I've asked those 2 partners that run Spirit Golf to please develop a proposal and a financial scenario for how they would utilize the Slackhouse, and the kinds of money that they would be willing to put into that Slackhouse in exchange for its use as a longer term lease. Obviously, they need a long lease in order to take advantage of any investments. So that's one potential use that is a channel that's engaged. I've had initial conversations with Sam Stewart, who owns Charland Farms. He's the farming tenant on all that property around on the Patterson buildings. He has expressed interest in the large bank barns, or at least maybe one of the bank barns, for equipment storage, as well as storage of straw bales, which they produce from their grain crops. That's in the early stages, but his interest is largely motivated by the fact that it's very difficult to move farm equipment and to move particularly straw bales on our lower Makefield roads. And he produces a lot, has a lot of activities there on Patterson Farm. And if he can increasingly store equipment there and store some materials there, it would reduce the congestion and the hazards that are created by moving those materials on and off Patterson Farm. So we have more conversations to go with Sam on his potential use of one or both of those barns. And anyone that would want to join me in those conversations, I'd love to have it. We know of the use of preserving Patterson, Preserve Patterson Farm Inc. as a nonprofit historical museum. There's more work to be done on that. Jeff gave us a presentation here a while ago on that. There's been a proposal that maybe township office or meeting space and public works storage is a potential use. And as I said earlier, we have Jay Spaziano Real Estate working on some scenarios for those 2 homes, the Slackhouse and the Satterswaith House. the initial reactions are that it's going to be very difficult to have those properties develop into private residences for a variety of reasons. We looked at comparable properties in the area, the real estate market assessments undergoing, and tonight we're getting deeper into the historical significance, and I'm looking to James to kind of, put more of a bow on that. Bet you have the executive summaries going. I'd like to climb into those, recognizing that any values that we have here and the utilizations are really going to be driven by those 4 homes and the 2 bank barns. And as we dig into that, I want the committee to think about setting ourselves a deadline to report out, to issue a report on the list of potential uses and some pros and cons. I said parenthetically, maybe by year end. I'm open to discuss that, but it seems if we give ourselves a deadline to shoot for, we're more apt to get it done. So let's think about, and I want to hear more about what you think we could come up with as potential uses, and whether year end is an appropriate goal or not, as we go through some of these summaries here with Bet. Comments, questions, issues? What's the committee thinking right now before we climb into exec summaries?
Yeah,
we know-
I agree with the idea that we need to get something, we need to set a date. I think that would be a great thing to kind of help motivate us. I think year end sounds reasonable to me.
Others?
Is the information the township shared with us about the condition of the Satterthwaite house been shared with the Jeff Herkos and farm preservation people, Helen Himes? Are they aware of the condition? Because Helen only mentioned if you paint it, it'll be fine.
Right.
Well, I think she was saying a paint job is necessary to stop some of the deterioration of the wood, but I know they all recognize it's in sorry condition. The degree of that, I don't know. I mean, you're referring back to the engineering report from?
Yes.
That was from what year was that done? It's aged now, right?
It's I don't know. There was one in the 2008, something like that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, then Jim added some inflationary numbers.
Right,
Right.
something like that. So
Yeah.
12 years
But
ago, and then
something had to have
updated.
been- Yeah, I mean, something had to have been done to that house since 2008. So it's probably not current because
Yeah.
you can't leave a house for, what is that, 12 years, 13? Like you guys all own houses, right? Like you can't go 13 years without doing one thing to it,
Yeah.
right? So something had to have been improved in that time as well.
And I know with the Spaziano Real Estate Group, when they toured the house, they had a builder with them. What was the name? Chance Worthington with them, who's a local expert in restoring historical homes and does a lot of historical renovation. And I've asked for Chance to give us his assessment of both of those homes. Informally, his assessment of Satterthwaite is that it may not be savable. Everything you touch just starts falling apart. That was informal, but we want to follow up with him and see. He was challenged to think of how he could salvage that, but again, for early kind of first reactions. And as I guess Helen said, these wood frame houses, they're a whole lot different than the stone ones in terms of their ability to last.
Did we actually go into the back of that lean-to section?
He did. Chance and I
Chance
walked.
did? Oh, okay.
Chance and I walked back there. It's a little scary.
Is it stone?
Is it the part that she was saying was stone? Yeah, you have the same question I do.
You know, I didn't see that absolute back wall. There's really no lighting in there. I mean, we were looking around quickly, but it's been pretty bastardized over the years in terms of little, wallpaper and just more modern toggling. So to really understand, what's behind that would take a little more effort than we expended, that's for sure.
And as in terms of the time frame, I agree that we need a deadline, but I think the end of the year, which is basically a month away, is a little tight, considering we haven't really talked much about potential uses. So.
Yeah,
this doesn't have to be
end of
final
year
either.
looks good on paper, but when you actually look at the calendar, there isn't a lot of time, is there?
Maybe end of January instead.
That works for me. Others, Jim, John, any thoughts on that score?
I think that's reasonable. I mean, one question, it doesn't seem to me that there's many reuses for the properties that would be in any way a public amenity. As far as open, whether it's a private residence or an office or something in between. But I guess the question in my mind is there a justifiable cost to restore the house, when at the end of the day, it's really the charm, the character from the street, which is all 99% of the township's ever going to see.
Mm-hmm.
So perhaps it's a loss, but maybe there's a rebuild that keeps the facade or something like that.
Right.
You are on track there, Jim.
So I think his assessment, his kind of off the cuff assessment was it's almost unsavable, and you'd be better taking it to the ground and building the exact same house like from scratch. Is that kind of where he's like, because it reaches a point where you can't actually repair it? Is that kind of where he was heading?
Yeah, because I quizzed him really because what happens sometimes with these very old homes that are really beyond fixable is they keep three walls, right? They keep the two sides in the front, and it looks the same, and behind it they put up steel beams and build a McMansion or modern house, whatever is functional, usable. But from the street, from the outside, it's the same. And his reaction is, even under that plan, he would probably rebuild the facades with modern materials, because what's there is, it's too far gone to even use the real material if it's just a facade.
Yeah.
Again, it's not an engineering estimate that's drilled into wood, but he's done a lot of this, and that was his take.
He's going to give us a more formal assessment, I think. Dennis, is that correct?
Yeah, and I think that's important. So I don't want to, overly prejudge that, but
That was Mr. Worthington, the contractor, right?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dennis, I would suggest if Spaziano could give us just a land value. So just hypothetically speaking, if somebody were to acquire the ground conditioned upon replicating the facade of the home, what is that in and of itself?
right,
Once we remove the mandate of restoring it, it actually becomes much simpler as far as the reuse.
right, right.
Right, and then you wonder whether you just subdivide it for the house portion or you deal with all of the other outbuildings.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I'll remind everybody that parcel, that 5-acre parcel is already subdivided.
At Sattersworth, yes.
Yeah, Satterthwaite, yeah.
And Spaziano's assessment, he said, as someone who owns and lives in, you know, an early American home with an outbuilding and a barn and all that, and who has worked in the real estate business, selling and marketing those, he said more than once, less is more. You don't want the barns and you don't want the buildings because it's just more deployment of capital that you as a homeowner would have to put out to maintain them. So he thinks less is more, and we'll get a more thorough report. But he was also there are location issues with both of those properties. Hold aside the quality or age of the building or the constraints there. The locations are not ideal.
Residential.
Yeah, let's face it. An individual who can buy a property and put $1 million or $1.5 million into it, restoring it, is someone of means who has a lot of discretion, who probably doesn't want to live on the same driveway as a golf course, and have no privacy, but kind of live in a goldfish bowl. That it's not that setting. Even if the house is beautiful, that's not a setting where that kind of purchaser would be happy. And same is true at the Sattersworth house to a degree. It is directly in the path of Mercer County Airport. And if you've ever stood there when a plane is landing and you see their landing gear in really sharp focus, you realize that's a drawback, as well as just being close to the road and kind of in a fishbowl there as well. So there are some macro location issues that I think make those that he has said will make those challenges as private residences because they're not desirable locations. And you only market those properties to people who can afford to buy want desirable locations.
So Dennis, just as we're talking about the timeline and finishing, we said end of December. I think now we're talking about end of January. Do we know when we're going to get all this information back from everyone? Because depending on when they give it back, we would need to leave ourselves. So I think there was a couple things on there. There's the real estate report. There's the repair. What he thinks. And then I think is the township getting us information on if they have what their public use needs are, or did we already get that?
No, I've asked for that, but they don't have a township plan or something they can go by that said, oh yes, we need over the next 5 or 10 years we need X additional square footage of office space or storage. They don't have that. So I've asked them for that, but I don't have any timeline on when they could, take a position on that. With respect to Spirit Golf that runs, that manages the Makefield Highlands, I said we would want their report, their proposal, at least by the end of the year, and they said that shouldn't be a problem. That's as much as I know on a timeline. And Sam Stewart, it's hard to bother them when they're harvesting. They're busy. You got to catch them on a rainy day when they're. But I think when we get kind of past Thanksgiving here, the harvest should be largely over, and I think the time will be a little more available. And I'd be happy to set up a meeting with any combination of us to sit down with Sam and his nephew, Tim, and talk about their, their potential uses of some of those buildings in a more serious way.
Dennis, did the contractor give any input specific to the Slackhouse of what walls inside might be load bearing or not? Meaning, the exterior of the stone looked to be in terrific shape. But I agree with the premise that living in a fishbowl for a residence is probably a long shot. But as a professional office, whether it was an accountant, attorney, wealth advisor, it's probably a nice location. I would see the biggest challenge being the floor plan with the multiple levels, room sizes. I'm just wondering how much of that floor plan could be opened up to a more contemporary layout. Did he give any input on what was load bearing inside?
Not explicitly. I know
Okay.
that there seemed to be a fair amount of latitude on the second floor. I think because the second floor was kind of pieced up over the years. So I had a sense that there was more latitude up there than certainly the first floor. But with that new kitchen, that 20th century kitchen and things, I don't know what to think of that.
Other conceptual question I don't have an answer for is there any uses that we believe would be restricted or otherwise not look favorably upon? I'm just wondering that the outcome of our committee, we can define a number of uses. Ultimately, will this need to go to some kind of open bid to the public? Regardless of our suggestions, and typically what I've seen is when there's a process, there will be a request for proposals, and that request will give some parameters of what uses will be entertained or what will not. So just a thought is we've been coming up with uses that would be good for it. I think we should just keep in mind as far as what restrictive we might want to consider.
Like, could the barn be used as a wedding venue? I know AOY can't use it but everyone I mentioned that I'm doing this with, like they just say barn should be for wedding venue. But I know we're trying to do that at the golf course. So is that an opportunity, or is that something that's not allowed?
I mean, my understanding from the Board of Supervisors, and James, if you're McCartney, if you're still on, speak up. But it's we're not constrained, and any and everything is on the table. Now, to Jim's point, if the township decides, all right, we're going to develop the Slackhouse into a venue, a party venue, or any commercial use, office use, in the actual execution of that, because they're a government entity, they would be putting out a request for proposal and going through a very transparent bidding process, and then selecting the highest bidder. But that that would be after they've made the decision of, okay, this is what we want to do with it. Now we have to go execute it. Kurt, township manager, let's execute this correctly according to our policies, which I think is where Jim's going in terms of the multiple bidding process. So I view what we're doing in many ways as kind of testing the water on ideas. We're not coming up with the buyer or the actual the final utilization, but here's a potential one. And if the township wants to execute that consistent with township policies and procedures, we think that would be a good idea. That's how I'm viewing it.
Shall we jump
They've
into,
said multiple times, no constraints. We should consider no constraints. I mean, they've said that numerous times in meetings. So yeah, do we just want to finalize the timeline? Because if we're not, sorry, I'm gonna nudge on these milestones. If we're if we're doing if we're saying end of December is when we're gonna get a lot of the feedback, or would we be able to do anything with that by end of January? I just want to make sure that we feel comfortable, because I know we put end of January, but I don't want to get to January and be like, we left ourselves with a week to look at all everyone's proposals and stuff, right? I don't know how everyone feels about that. Is December the date that end of December is when most of them are gonna get us back the information?
I mean, I think that's the goal. Yeah, I think that's the attempt.
Yeah,
I mean,
so then-
in some cases it's loose. In some cases it's more formal. I think the end of January would make sense to me, that we really circle the wagons post the holidays and bear down and narrow down, some of these uses. I know we just hit 9 o'clock, but Beth, do you want to talk about the exec summaries and
sure.
and maybe in talking through those, that will help our thinking as well, in terms of how much work we have to do or how much we don't. But I'd like the end of January just as a placeholder right now.
Okay.
So Dennis came up with this format, which was lovely, and then asked me to fill in and make pages for all of the major buildings. So we'll start here with the Slackhouse, and we've listed this as an event space for Makefield Highlands. Sell it to a private homeowner. Again, that has to come in from Spaziano. Convert to township offices are the three major things we've come up with. Does anybody, how do you want to do this? You want to just add things in, or do you want to go through each one, or have you looked at it?
Yeah, is the event space include what I forget their name, the golf company?
Spirit Golf,
What's the
yeah.
company?
Spirit.
Thank you. Is number one supposed to be them, or should we be putting a fourth option that the current
No,
golf
that's
course
them.
renters?
That's them.
Okay, they intend to use it as an event, like it's not.
Right. They see back here, they actually talked about actually building a large barn to serve as the wedding venue, and to have this as kind of the staging point for like the bridal party, that kind of stuff. And then have a big barn, because right now they're just using a big tent right now.
Oh,
So,
okay.
that's what I hear they want to do.
Yeah.
And we're going to wait and see what they come up with on that.
And what they've said is they put up this tent for their event space. And they've had just over in the low, around 40, 45 events this past year. And it has a capacity of 200. Their concept is, if this house was renovated, it would be a very cool space for the wedding party, for the bridesmaids to get dressed and party and
Take pictures and all that stuff.
And the second floor would really be event planning office space, an office space for the Makefield Highlands, which I understand they have none. They're always sitting in the dining room and stuff trying to get work done. And the two scenarios that team has said is, we could look at what it would take to renovate this house, because this house will attract a lot more events, just having this house available, because people want that kind of setting. Renovate this house, have it associated with an event space, which is today's tent, or build a big event space, which would cost a lot less than renovating this house, quite frankly, and making that event space and this house together. And those are two kind of levels of capital expenditure, and that's what they were going to look at.
But that's
We would
but
just have to
that's-
make sure there's enough space, right, for that to build, and
Yes.
that would work.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
Okay.
that has to be figured out, but behind this house, they could
Right.
move some parking lots and things and and make that work. I, for one, actually like that idea because
Mhm.
there isn't enough event space, I think, in this area. I mean, people go far and wide to find a good wedding venue, or a venue for a fundraiser gala or whatever. I think having more event space here would be a great idea. I think it would do well. It depends on the economics and the deal with the township and all those other things. But it's a ready-made kind of opportunity with the being right there on the Highlands. It's consistent with its location.
Right. So you could actually conceive packages of people staying in the area, using the event space, and then going golfing,
Right.
all of which helps them out.
Right.
Okay. Any
Okay.
other comments on that?
But only other comment there, Spirit Golf is the only one that would probably have the parking to go with it. Another operator in theory could perhaps build something, but
Well,
I'm assuming that they then run into a parking issue, whereas Spirit already has the lot with the Highlands Club.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a function of the relationship between Spirit and the township. I mean, I
Mhm.
think if that were the final use, I would expect the township to put that out to competitive bid and let
Okay.
Spirit Golf bid on it together with other competitive companies, and maybe somebody else would outbid Spirit Golf on running the course for them and just replace them completely and also run this. So
Makes sense.
I would see it as a competitive bid, but Spirit Golf certainly would have an inside track given the relationship that they're in.
Okay, so this is the Janney house. It's the other property. It's being well used and well cared for. We'll just move on. The well house, I don't have any comments on that. I don't know if you want to spend time on that right now. We'll just jump to the other caretaker's house, which is also being used right now as the artist studio. Again, historically, you heard from Helen that it's very significant as perhaps one of the oldest properties in the township. You are getting some sort of rental income from there, and that's keeping the house going. Anybody have anything else you want to touch that, make other recommendations?
I mean, I think, I don't know if 1 and 2 would just be that it's a plain old rental, like someone could just live there, right? Doesn't have to, right? I mean, I know the studio pays rent, but someone, I mean, it's
Okay.
tight quarters, but someone could live there.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, just that stone section and where you had a whole family living there in the day.
I
You
mean,
gotta, yeah.
I know we passed over the Janney house.
I'll go back.
No, but which Helen's recommending we refer to as Locust Grove. But anyway, I mean, I think the artist use of that is terrific, and I guess to some degree, it revolves around how large, how active the artist of Yardley can become. If that grows, bigger into more of an artist community, I mean, could the caretaker house be a residence for visiting artists that stay for a few months at a time? Or if it is the oldest home in Bucks County, as Helen is saying it could be, I mean, it's small. Could that be preserved just as the oldest home in Bucks County as something that people would tour when they're visiting the artist community? Because it associated with the success of the artist community, it could maybe take on a few other uses than what it has today. But I see
There could be
I see
additional
it always
research
connected
on
to that.
their backstory, right?
Yeah, it's a nice backstory, and and maybe clearing it out and having it more open and available for people to actually look around and understand the history of it, as opposed to, a crowded art studio now, would be a better use. I don't know, but I could picture that kind of thing.
Okay, something happened to my document. I'm gonna go get it again and then reshare.
Okay.
Didn't look good.
No, it didn't look good. That's a little worrisome. So let me go find it again and see what the heck happened to it.
Well, while we're waiting on that, I'm probably gonna have to head out. It's about 2 a.m. here, so um, just to say though, I will be back at December 6th. So anytime between December 6th and probably January 10th are the best times for me to meet. I know it's the holidays, but if we can maybe get 1 or 2 meetings in around there, that would be great for me. And if we're planning on having any others in like down the road, I'd again really appreciate if we could do 7 instead of 7:30, if that would work for anyone. But yeah, I've already taken a look at the executive summaries, and I'll add anything afterward if I can think of it. Where would the best place to add things be, Bet? Is it in the
Email me.
Email you?
Email
Great.
me, and then we have a unified document to be working from.
Perfect. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
James.
Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not going to make changes to the document then, so that I can preserve things here. So I'll make notes elsewhere.
Okay.
Oh, so you lost, yeah, so what you had written something there, it's gone.
Yeah, and it got all cuckoo. So enough
Debbie,
of that.
only other thought is maybe instead of rent, maybe that's it's an annex to the artist. Maybe it's this gallery space. I mean, something
It's
that would
too
be.
small.
Oh, it's too small.
Yeah, it's too
Yeah.
small for a gallery space. You can't stand more than 2 feet apart. So
Not in today's environment. That would not be good. Yeah.
yeah, so I'll add that and tour as oldest house. Is that what we had on there?
Yeah, something open to the public would be nice.
Yeah, Jim, I think you're right, Jim, but because, somewhere in here, it would seem, if it's a community service that it's open to the public. I know the artists of Yardley obviously are, but, a historical tour, museum record, that would feel right, that's an element here.
Yeah.
Right.
It looks like the edits that I sent over didn't get added or were lost somehow.
Who is that?
This is John. Hello.
Hey, John.
I can shoot over. I mean,
Shoot them over to me. I've been
I
pretty
was
busy.
kind of
I'm
harsh,
sorry.
and I said, let's blow up a couple of these buildings for parking for you, Betty. Because they look like they needed serious work, and I wasn't sure what else we could do with them. So I'll shoot that over to you now. I'll find it.
Okay.
Okay.
I would less is more.
Yeah, I mean, if we
In
knock down
fact.
some of these buildings, what my thought was, we could, and this was Jim Scott and I went with Jim, the engineer, and the facilities guy, whose name I'm forgetting.
Greg.
Thank you. And one of his ideas was if we took down some of the older buildings that were falling apart, we could reuse the wood to shore up the existing buildings that we wanted to keep, or then then sell any extra wood that we had at the end.
Yes, that pertains particularly to the equipment barn or whatever over at Satterthwaite that they were talking, because some really nice barnwood over there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so the pack house is one of the concrete structures that AOI is looking to acquire as additional educational space. And we included that maybe Public Works needs it. We don't know. We haven't heard.
Now, when I look at this, it reminds me, when we talk about estimated costs, ultimately, when we get to recommendations, we can have $ TBD, right?
Right.
So how are we going to get ourselves on a path where that's not a TBD, but we have a credible estimate for the improvement expenses?
Well,
we
did
need-
I
Jim
think that
come
was
up-
step 4, wasn't it? That we were gonna do like ROIs and like a proper financial analysis. I think this is more ad hoc about, I thought this was more about the uses, right? And the
No.
descriptions of the building.
No, you're right. It is,
Yeah.
but and the financial analysis we can do once we have the input, but the, you know, the cost to renovate is an input to that. And it just hit me that if we don't have some ball rolling down an alley ready to hit some pins at some point, we're never going to get those estimates, right?
didn't
Can I
Jim-
just chime in on that? Because AOI is in touch with a local engineering firm that we're going to start talking about making those improvements and costing out what that improvement would be. So that'll be another thing coming from another angle, but you know,
that'll be just
the
this one
big
building.
discussion here is utilities.
Yeah.
You know, are you going to put public services in here or not? And if you want this to be a you know, vibrant thing, that would be really good, you know. So
Yeah,
if you have the Satterthwaite property and maybe, you know, Shoreland uses the hay barn, which is there and in really good shape, and somebody else deals with, you know, a commercial space for the other half of the property on the Satterthwaite side, you know, you may want to just bisect those things, put in a double lane where AOI's road is now, and put in the utilities, and then you've got a lot of options opening up.
No, you're right. You know, township water and sewer needs to be run to these places because I think realistically to use them on a larger scale. But to your point, Bet, on the engineer that you're working with, that is to develop an estimate for this pack house.
Just for
only.
this building.
Yeah.
So, but it's another way, and we haven't gotten anything other than, you know, the initial cost that Jim Majewski gave us about
Right.
Renovating, and he says those don't include utilities. So, you know, I haven't gotten any definition, you know, if this building costs $60,000 to renovate, according to that summary sheet they gave us initially, what does that include, you know?
Yeah.
So I'd like a little more detail from them.
Well, and your current septic system, how often is it, you know, emptied? And, you know, I mean, you start adding more space that you're going to start using, you're going to have more people there using. So,
Well,
you know.
this is on its own septic, or was at some point. Helen says this was a residence. Well, that back portion of the building, that very last room, had bunk beds in it for the field workers. I wouldn't call that a residence. Okay, because it was interim and probably migratory for all I know. I have no idea. But there was plumbing. There's still electric in there. There's still an alarm system in there. But I can't get a definition out of Majewski as to whether or not the plumbing works. I can't get into the building to do measurements. I can't, you know, and I'm told.
Jim didn't have the keys. When Jim Scott and I went on our walk, the facility gentleman had the keys to almost
Greg
everything.
has them.
Yes.
Greg has them.
So,
Yeah. So
got it.
I'm kind of getting word that on the other side of this building from this picture, is a septic field, but I don't know if that's been functional. Maybe it's collapsed after all these years. Who knows? Has to be checked out. But if you put public sewer in, then that solves that problem.
Betty, we should be able to get a ballpark on sewer. I know rules of thumb are always dangerous, but we should be able to get a ballpark of X dollars per linear foot to run it off of the roadway. So for instance, if we find out it's, you know, 1,000 feet at $100 a foot, we might just do the math real quick and say, hey, we can replace the septic far cheaper. But I don't know that, I don't know what that X is, but
Yeah, I don't know what the X is either, but that's what we need.
yeah, so I can make some calls and try to get a placeholder.
Great, that'd be
So,
wonderful.
yeah, the challenges with these are contractors are, ungodly busy right now. Most aren't in a position to do quotes when they don't think there's work at the end of it. So that's
Right,
it's obviously a challenge, but maybe a placeholder just to point us in the right direction.
right.
And Bet, the engineer that you're looking at working with, let us know how you make out with that. Maybe that's a organization that we want to tap for other purposes. I mean, the township, I think what we're going to say to the township is, we want you, the township, to spend some money to with some engineering firms to estimate some of these expenses. Once we can kind of see the whites of the eyes of a use and we think we're
Right.
closing in on something,
Right,
can we, spend real money on an engineering firm and figure out,
Right.
start getting some estimates.
right.
Okay.
Okay, so then we moved next door on the Patterson side to the barn. And, the upper floor, which is on the right side, has a pretty good roof, has a pretty good floor. It's just got a lot of stuff up there. There's some hay still up there. I believe, that is the big entryway for the tractors on the ramp going into the barn on the second level. And so a lot of that I'm modeling after, if you've ever been over to Pearlsville's Mill over in Stockton, New Jersey, they have a stone grist mill essentially that they've renovated through the Delaware Canal Commission as a venue. But they just opened up what they call the sawmill, and it's pretty raw inside, but I was over there for an artist opening, and the artists were just delighted. It gave it a wonderful feel. They only rent it 9 months of the year when the weather allows, so there's no insulation. there's just electric for it to showcase the art, and they use it for a venue. And again, it's a very nice rustic venue for probably a variety of things, people who want that kind of a feel for their event. But we've also included that it should be a farm and equipment storage, storing stuff on site. We'd have to confirm the weight bearing capacity if they want to put equipment in there. In fact, that's where the whole structure needs to be confirmed in terms of its structural integrity and what it can hold. The lower level, however, we kind of thought might be a role because the stone supports are very interesting and gives you an education about the historic farming and construction methods, barn building techniques, that sort of thing, that could be opened up to tell a story about the history of farming and agricultural techniques.
Did they get the cats?
2 cats are still wandering around. Gosh darn it. So, so no, they have not gotten all of the cats. I saw the cats rescue people over there, but they've only gotten 2 of the 4, from what I understand. The cages, traps are still there, but those cats are pretty smart after all these years. And then we go to the Satterthwaite house, where we can sell to a private homeowner. Again, that may vary. Convert to township offices, which we talked about, create a historic living farm museum. And we might just, take number 1 here and say sell to a private developer for commercial use, if that's what we get out of Spaziano.
How about to a private entity?
Yeah, we could do that.
That way it could be either way, and then.
Right. And number 2, convert to township offices. I mean, it may just be convert to offices, and whether it's a private company that's renting them or owning them, or the township is to be determined.
Yeah, I mean, Spaziano is pretty adamant that like spending money on these renovations was not really a good use of township money, to that private entity would probably be better, but we'll see what comes out of them. So, can I just ask, how are we feeling about the Historic Living Farm Museum? We'll leave that in as an option.
Well, if my first meeting in this committee told me anything, that those things lose money and end up back in the township hands anyway. So,
Right.
I-
That's why I'm asking.
But
I think-
you said that I believe her name is Miss Doan, wants to do that and will be vocal in her opinion on that. On trying to accept
Well,
this
that's
stuff?
the preservation, Patterson Preservation Group.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't think we can ignore it. I think we need to
Leave it on the list.
there for now.
It's an option. It might not be a very feasible option, but it is an
It is an
option.
option.
We're not supposed to be taking things off at this point, right? So
Okay.
is the option that you talked about, Dennis, where they talked about where you basically, you leave that front looking the same and then it's the back is just gutted and you redo it because you can't really fix it, but you kind of make the visual still look like the essence of it. Is that, how do we capture that in here? What was the thought process of doing that? That would turn into an office or something?
Well, to me, that could be one or two. It's a
Okay.
private entity or developer, private entity, I guess, that would, take on the property under certain easements and restrictions, right? That
Right.
they're not allowed to just knock it down and do whatever they want, but under the right restrictions and put it to a good use, whether that's a residence or it's an office. And how they decide to do that, 3 walls redone, that's hard to say, but that's, the use is the same. The execution.
Okay. I didn't know if that was to get to offices or, because if you're just keeping a front and you're cutting off the entire back of that house, I mean, now your possibilities for use could be actually greater, right? You could actually do some, it could be a functioning business for somebody because now it would have the right, it wouldn't have all those weird doors and, the walls and.
Could be a
Right.
bed
I mean,
and
that was
breakfast.
yeah, exactly, because it's, you could build whatever the parameters of what you need, you could just build it, right? Because
Right.
they're not contained within there. So that's what I meant on, does that kind of open up what we want to add for uses? If we
That could
say
open
that,
it up and you can bundle that property to go with the barn and all of a sudden somebody's got a bed and breakfast with, a little wedding venue and it's off and running.
yeah.
Yep.
Do we want to put any of that? What do you guys think? Is it too out there, or do we
Well,
feel like
that's
it's
multiple
I think-
buildings. We're talking about the whole, I guess, all S1 to S5 or whatever it is as applied.
Yeah.
So
Right.
Yeah.
that would have to, I guess.
I just
Yeah.
have a feeling we're going to get information back that says we can't save this building, right? So we need how do we save it and not save it at the same time, right? So we preserve
Yeah.
the front end of it and then do the back. And then I think that really opens up its opportunities for use to the community. And if we, to your point, if we tag in the barn and tag it on the other stuff, then that's great, right? Then we've just made it even better for someone.
Well, do we want to do a Patterson, what we think that we could do at Patterson, what we think we could do at the Satterthwaite as its own little sheet, if we do all, was it P1 to P9 and S1 to S6, and
Yeah.
we bundle them all together. Here's some of our ideas of what we think could be feasible if we, did it all up together.
Yeah, I mean.
Like what the options for a bundle versus single would be. Is that
Yeah.
what you mean? Yeah, that's a good idea.
Whole plot.
I think you're onto something, because use number 1 here, for example, I mean, that could apply to S1 or it could apply to S1 through S5.
Mhm.
And so
Right.
to number 2, I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
That kind of, that could be the entire property or it could be an element of the property.
Yeah.
Those are options. Those are all permutations. How to best capture that,
Not sure. Not sure, unless you put in a page here with like just a narrative that says Satterthwaite properties.
Yeah, and then.
Yeah, but or you could even say S1 to S, whatever the heck it is.
Right, we'll
9.
put in it, we could do that. We could put in a page that says, with a narrative.
Yeah,
In general, the Satterthwaite properties are blah, blah, blah.
right,
And this is what we suggest.
right.
So the well garage, again, I put in a workshop. I think it makes a really cool workshop, but it's got the, renovations because the concrete floor is not intact. But it's a well house. So, that problem of having a structure to protect the well goes away if you put in public utilities.
Right.
The small barn, this is the one we talked about with the really neat barnwood.
Sell it.
Because sell it? Is that what you
Sell it.
said?
The roof is falling
I think
apart.
that's the sell the wood.
And if you look at the front, where those beams are, they're actually not very structurally sound.
No, this does not.
This is one of those things, sell it, keep the wood, or reuse the wood in another aspect. Same with that.
Use the
corn
wood somewhere in Yardley. Is there some public area in is there something in Yardley that wood could be used for that's owned by the township?
Well, I believe
that even feels a little nicer, right?
I believe the contractor Worthington was saying that was some really nice barnwood, and he was giving us some interesting prices as to how much that goes for. So that might be a revenue
Yeah,
source.
that's a good point. Is there anyone on the committee that wants to take on the responsibility of doing some internet searches and find, contractors or dealers in barnwood that would be willing to look at this and say, hey,
I'll take that on.
You
Because
got
there's the guy in
$20,000
Percy.
of barnwood in here, and it cost me $5,000 to take it out, so I'll give you 15 for it. Or I have no idea, but
There's a guy in Percy that buys entire buildings and will sell the entire building so someone else can build it. So, I mean, I found him, and I'm sure I can find somebody else that will
Okay.
buy barnwood and then, give us pennies on the dollar, but still give us, a few more pennies to fix something else up.
yeah, if there's a few of these outbuildings that we'll end up taking apart, let's see what kind of salvage value there is from some of this old wood, right?
I gotta tell you-
Thank you, John.
Can I just add that this is a really interesting structure to paint on canvas? It has a certain charm. But anyway, I'll just put that in there. I'm sorry.
What was the estimate you mentioned when you guys were talking about the barnwood? You said he was throwing out estimates.
I don't remember the prices, but
Oh, okay.
I got the impression, I am left with the impression that it was a valuable resource.
Okay,
Okay.
cool.
This little small barn, less is more.
Yeah.
We'll just, and the main barn, which is enormous and really nice inside. It's basically, some of the pictures that are shared on our Google Drive from Jim Majewski, they've basically reinforced. This whole wall came off. They redid the whole thing. They've redone the roof. So that second floor looks pretty darn stable. Those of you who went up on it, can you verify that?
Yeah, it looked good.
It looked great.
I mean, I don't want to live there, but I mean, it's really nice.
But it's much larger than the Patterson barn. It is, however, the flooring is separated a little bit, like by 1 inch or so that it allows for air circulation. So it is a hay barn, from what I'm told. Does that make sense, Dennis? Who's the barn expert?
Yeah, it's definitely a hay barn. I mean, that's what those big mouths were for.
Yeah.
And they had to be strong to carry all that weight. And that's
Right.
the question now. What is the weight capacity of the first floor? I have no idea. I mean, if some of those beams are dry rotted and weak, you could collapse it.
Yeah.
Get up with hay without.
So there's
nothing
an
to-
engineering confirmation that we need on that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then again, the lower level could be used for the history of farming, that kind of stuff. Again, because the structure down there is really interesting. But again, township has not yet filled in all the holes, from what I understand, mostly on the Patterson side because of the cats. But
I think they want to wait for the cats and then they're going to go after it.
Yep,
a little
I think
more.
that's what we're holding off on. So, okay, so that's the Satterthwaite barn. And again, in our executive narrative, as you get into the Satterthwaite properties, all of them from, 1 through 5, then we could talk about, bundling or not bundling them as resale for reuse. Is that the direction you want me to go in terms of writing this up?
Yeah.
All right. Got a little tool shed out back. It's a nice concrete concrete block structure, and the township is using it right now. Again, it could stay, it could not stay, it could, whatever. And that's it. Okay. So back on the Patterson side, who was saying it? John, were you saying we should just tear down some of those garages?
I did. Hold on, let me go back to my list. I put that down for a couple of different buildings. So I put it down for a lot of buildings. That way it didn't look like I was specifically going after all of them, or specific ones. Like
Okay.
the well house. I mean, if we connect that to the central, to the central power and central water, I would either knock it down, or if we have to keep it, then see if we can renovate it for, maybe a one-person artist studio or something.
Well, the other thing that's in that well house by the Janney is the electric panel. The electric all comes in through there too, and then feeds down to the bottom. So you'd have to move the electric. Just saying, you could leave the well house. It's cute.
Same with the
But-
tenant
and
garage. I put
And the
same
tenant
thing.
garage.
Yeah.
Tenant garage is very useful for us because we need storage, but the structure itself is like corrugated plastic. So
So it doesn't really fit. I mean, we can get a bunch of more parking spots there and maybe find you a different home and get you something a little prettier,
Yeah.
maybe with the reclaimed wood from somewhere else.
Yeah, no, rather use the other garage across the
Yeah.
parking lot from that rather than the tenant garage.
Is that the
Because the
first
one that
garage?
we're using isn't very structurally sound. And,
Like that one.
put a person door on the other one because it's really heavy to get into.
So yeah, a couple of these I did put, demolish and then use for parking, which sounds so suburbia. I understand that, but if we want to do something with the barn, you need somewhere to park, and that's something that we need to do.
And what do you feel about this one? The equipment barn?
I think the second floor we could definitely do something. Maybe put storage down below and then have a walk up for a couple of artist studios down there.
Okay.
Or some other kind of workshop, or blow it up and sell the wood. That's another option I put down there too.
And when you say artist studio, then does that include plumbing?
That would have to be a call. I mean, that would have to be the conversation. Do we need plumbing? Do we need somewhere? We're going to need more toilets. I don't think if we're going to do
Definitely going to need more toilets.
Yes. But I mean, I don't know what plumbing is required. I know you guys have to wash paint brushes. I flunked art, so I know very little. But no, I mean, at some point we're going to need plumbing, and if there's
Need
electrical,
plumbing. I mean, you don't need a kitchen in there or anything like that, but you need sanitary
hand wash sink and
sanitary
a slop sink or
services.
something.
Yeah.
And depending upon the utilizations, I mean, we also don't want to end up with, one building and a parking lot.
Yes.
I mean, you want the look and the feel of the country and a farm and the history. So if the building is got, some real history to it, then that has appeal in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
But if it's a 1945 corrugated metal, there's
Garage, blow it up, and
it has no redeeming kind of cultural history like that, then that's a different story.
and to me, like the corn crib's great. It's beautiful, but it's to make that usable for an artist. I don't know how you do that with the ventilation with the slats.
You
So to
don't, you
me-
keep it as a historic farm building
Or blow it up and,
or blow it up and sell it for farm.
or see if you can move it 100 yards towards the edge right along the farmable land, and then that way you better utilize the space, because there's some dead space in between these buildings that could, definitely be
Yeah.
better utilized.
Right,
You know, but I think, I don't know who just said it, but, maybe a use that we should define is, an historical outbuilding. It's just, we want to keep that building because it's part of the historical ambiance.
Yeah.
It without a real, explicit function, but it contributes to the whole, the whole bouquet of the effort.
Pretty is a reason.
Yeah, pretty is a reason. Yeah,
So I think
That's
that-
how the township ended up with it, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's in township hands because we wanted to preserve the character of Bucks County, right? So,
right.
Right. But at the same time, like there's a couple of these little outbuildings, if they have some neat history and some age to them, I mean, they're not expensive to keep up. You got to do it. You got to paint them every so many years, and you got to control the woodchucks, but it's not like trying to maintain the Janney house or the Satterswaite house, I mean, it's small potatoes, and maybe they're worth it. But again, it's all driven by the houses and the barns, really.
mhm.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. We would give the township recommendation if we're gonna say kind of leave as is, but just make it, upgrade it, make it look better. And if we're not gonna do any utilities in it, we would have to just have some consideration, I would think, for what annual maintenance would be on that for the township. Like,
Sure.
we recommend we keep this building, and it's it costs it to make it not look like this, right? To let it get like this, you have to do, this is the amount that would have to be spent. And I'm really happy we said woodchuck once this meeting, because I was getting worried we weren't gonna say it. Yay. I was like,
Yay.
oh, we did it. Good.
Okay.
All right.
All right, I'm gonna stop sharing. Great,
Okay.
good feedback. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Have the agenda called for a discussion of current and next steps activities? I mean, have we discussed next steps, I think, through this?
I think
process?
through the prior discussion about setting a date, we got to some next steps. We've
Yeah.
got somebody who's looking at resale things. We've got somebody else who's Jim's gonna look at a thumbnail cost for public utilities, and I'm gonna make edits. If you have other edits you want to add, just send them to me, please. And because it's a Word document, it's a static document. It's not like a Google document, so you can't make edits and expect me to see them. So
Okay. Okay. Is there other business that anybody wants to bring up? I know we made Sarah happy by mentioning woodchucks. But Fred?
Just briefly, as I mentioned, I had spoken with John Natick, who has the property across Mirror Lake, which he's restored. He's been there over 40 years and apparently rebuilt the barn and other buildings out there. So I thought it would be interesting just to get his perspective of an individual who's gone through that process of restoring an historic home, which I think Helen mentioned was early 1800s, 1820s or so. Plus he uses the outbuildings as well. So if anybody's interested, he said he was willing to have a discussion with us, meet with us, visit his property. I'd be willing to set that up if anybody feels it's of interest.
John's a really nice guy, by the by. So if anybody wants to do that, feel free. Buy a bicycle.
I think I said to you, Fred, I mean, if you want to schedule something with them, don't restrict it to to my schedule, but if you want to set something up, let me know when it's scheduled, and if I can make it, I will. If I conflicted, I obviously wouldn't, but
Yeah.
I would,
He's restored his whole house inside to a period,
yeah.
Classic colonial
Because I
restoration.
think you're right. I mean, you're having a discussion with a guy like that. I mean, he might be thinking of something for these properties that none of us have even contemplated. So I think it's a worthwhile endeavor.
Okay, the other thing you mentioned about speaking with Sam Stewart. So I'd be happy to join you with any of those discussions.
Okay. Okay, yeah, that would be good. That would be good. Sam's a good guy. He's busy, I mean, he takes care of, he make hay when the rain shines, so when the sun shines. So that's what you got to do. All right. I'll let you know, Fred, on that.
Hey, Dennis, if I'm going to get somebody to come out and look at these buildings, who do I have to arrange that through?
I would coordinate that through Kurt Ferguson.
Okay.
His emails are, he's always copied on all of our emails. He'll set that up.
Okay.
Anything else here, team, that you should bring up? If not, I would ask our host if there are any public comments. If our host is
There's currently no public comment.
no public comment. Okay.
Thanks, Kyle.
Thank you. All right. We were going to talk about the next meetings. Beth, as our secretary, what do we have on our calendar here?
Not fair.
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Do we have anything planned past this month?
I thought there
There's
were
one
some.
for December. Yeah.
Yeah, we
When
have
is that?
something.
Can you check, Sarah? Do you have it in front of you?
Yep. I was gonna say, I think I just had it up. So let me see if I can pull it.
December 8th, Wednesday.
There you go. Oh, you're quick. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm
And
sorry
I
to
don't know if
interrupt.
we
I
wanna-
actually just had a caller call in. Do you want to bring her in? Is it too late? Name's Kathleen.
No, a public comment? No, bring her in. Thank you.
But I'll bring her in right now.
Hello, this is Dennis Stedman. Did you have a comment to make to the Ad hoc Property Committee?
She's in the room now.
Okay.
Hello?
Hello? Yes, this is the Ad hoc Property Committee. Do you have a comment?
Yes, my name is Kathleen Herco. I've been watching the whole meeting. I have a lot of interest in seeing that the buildings on the farm are preserved. I actually live in a preserved home in Lower Makefield. I think it's an awful idea to knock down many of the buildings that you're talking about. I think that they're an important part of the history of the farm, and I don't think we should be so quick to just say, let's knock this down, let's knock that down. And I certainly don't agree with the talking about all the buildings being used for artists. I understand that the artists of Yardley are on the farm, and that's a great use for it, but I think we should be thinking of other uses other than everything being used for artists. There's a lot of other uses for the buildings, and I think a lot of them should stay. That's just my opinion. Barn board does have some value, and we do know a lot about that ourselves, but not a lot of value like you're thinking. I think that keeping as many of the buildings you can and possibly letting the farmer use them is a much better idea than knocking them down. I just wanted to give my input. I've been watching the entire meeting, and that really bothers me that you're so quick to talk about knocking those structures down. I just wanted to give my input on that, and I appreciate
Thank you.
everything-
No,
I appreciate everything you're doing, but I think that's a really bad idea.
Okay, no, thank you. Thank you for your input and interest, certainly. And just, to be fair, I mean, this is a committee, and it's kind of, you're watching live discussion, and it's, the analogy of sausage being made. We're not coming to conclusions here tonight or any final recommendations, but we have to discuss all permutations and options. But we certainly hear you loud and clear when you say about the so many of the buildings being used for the artists. There are a lot of other uses that available for them. What other ideas do you have for other uses? I mean, we're all ears if you have suggestions there. Beyond the farmer using them or other things. What are you thinking of?
I think that small cottage is like a wonderful building. I think your ideas of keeping that as a place for people to visit and learn about the history of the farm, as Helen was bringing to light. There's a lot of history on the farm. And I think the ideas of using the barn behind Satterthwaite for, events, that's a wonderful idea. But I just don't, it just bothers me that to talk about, let's knock this down, let's knock that down. I know they're just ideas, but it hurts somebody that really has their heart is in those old buildings. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that feels that way. I just don't want to quickly decide they're not worth anything. I think there could be many other ideas other than knock them down. You're not going to find a lot of value in that barnwood.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, I appreciate you letting me talk. I just, like I said, old homes and structures are in my heart. I have one, and I just hope that you will think about the history.
Okay. Well, thank you. And
Okay.
Like I say, thanks for your interest and thanks for watching, and stay tuned. There's a lot more work to be done.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other public comment?
No more public comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. All right. We were talking about the calendar, December 8th, 7:30. That's on everyone's calendar, I take it?
Do we want to make 7 o'clock, or is that a problem?
Yeah. Mhm. James asked us to.
It has to work two ways. It has to work for the committee, and then we have to get the time slot with the hosting group. So
Right.
does it work for this committee, 7?
Works for me. It's just, if you can work out the logistics on the other end.
I mean, do we think maybe just ones in the future that are not planned yet? Because this one's planned for December 8th, and I guess you're saying it's all been worked through, right?
Yeah.
Everyone being available to host. I mean, we could just say as of January, but does that not help James? Is he?
Well, and actually, James will be back stateside on December 8th. He said between December 6th and Jan 10, I think, he's back home. So the 7:30 isn't a problem for him on this
Okay.
side of the pond. But if we go with that end of January deadline, let's look at a couple dates for the month of January. Maybe one early and one mid to late.
So we like Thursday nights. I got a calendar. Calendar.
Dennis, I just realized I will be flying back from being out of town on the 8th, so I would be joining the committee call late.
Okay,
All right.
So I apologize.
nope. Hey,
I would
Do
much
we
rather
want
be
an
at the
ad hoc?
committee than in the conference I have to go to.
okay.
Do we want a meeting in the township building like we did before? Do we want like a working session to go through all of this? Because I'm guessing we're getting all the information back and we have to kind of go through it all. Is that something we want to do and then have our normal meeting once we have something? It's up to you
Yeah,
guys.
I mean, if
We could
we
have a
needed-
working session on the 6th and then a regular meeting on the 13th, which are both Thursdays,
December 6th is a Monday.
January,
Sorry.
January 6th. 2022,
Oh, boy.
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
which we'll need to double up if we're going to get a set of
Yeah.
recommendations together and a final report.
And if we meet in the township building, it's not Zoom. They can't do hybrid. It's either all in person or all Zoom. So we need everybody to be available.
January 6th, I'm available. I'm sorry, I think you're
And-
talking December 6th.
And James said he would be in the US till January 10. So we should probably try to have a face-to-face with
That'd be nice.
when he's on this side, right?
Yeah.
So if we could put a soft mark on Jan 6, pencil that in. I got to coordinate with Katie and via email, we'll get things nailed down. But you want to shoot for 6, maybe 6 and 20, give us a couple weeks in between.
Well,
And then that would give us another 10 days or so till the end of the month when we're generating a report.
well, if we're going to get it out by the 31st, because then I'm leaving. So, there should be a draft of a final report. Yeah, the last week, the week of the 24th, which is the 27th, we should, at that would be the very latest that we should meet to do a report that should be final, that should be
Right.
saying, yes, this is what we're
I-
recommending.
I was suggesting Jan 6 and Jan 20, which would give us time, if we meet on Jan 20, then to get a report done by the 31st.
Are you meeting again? Do you want to meet again on the final report? That's my question.
I have a conflict on the 20th.
You are? Okay. You want to do the 13th or 27th if we're honing in on Thursdays? Does it matter what's other people's calendars look like for either of those days?
I'm open for now.
Yeah,
I'm open.
What was the date? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
The
13
13th,
or 27.
meet in person on the 6th.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Do a
Oh, okay,
Zoom-
I thought we
do a
switched.
Zoom on the 13th
this
to
month.
pretty much finalize the recommendations and then draft things up. And then should we meet again on the final on the 27th?
I think we'll have to do some things by email.
Yeah, I
guess
think
so.
if we read it, and then if we want to have a quick call on the 27th, we can have a quick call.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. I'll ask her to see if we can get a time slot on the 27th as a contingency, if we need it.
What's easier to schedule, and no pun intended, ad hoc? Which one is more easier to schedule? In person at the township meeting or the Zoom? Or are they both?
I think in person, the Zoom time slots get consumed by every
Got
township
it.
committee and group there is. But
Okay, so if we meet and then we decide we're not gonna be able to handle this in what we allotted, we probably could, in a quick fashion, get a in person. Is that what you, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
We just have to
Okay.
remember that the township always needs 3 days notice to make the public, for the public notice.
Right, right,
When
right.
there's a public meeting, they need three days for the public notice. So yeah, we can do it with that kind of, with that last minute, if you will. Okay. All right, I'll coordinate with Katie and we'll email and nail something down. And I'm feeling a little bad right now, scheduling things in 22. It just, I'm not psychologically ready for it.
I'm not ready. I get too much to do for the year to be over. I'm like, oh my goodness, I gotta get a move on.
Yeah. All right.
Dennis, when you're saying final report, what is the concept? Are you thinking that's our total final, this is it? Or is it-
No, this isn't our final set of recommendations, but what I was thinking is that we would have a final report on here are the uses that we think are these, that these are potential uses, and lock and load the potential uses. So then the rest of our time can be spent on collecting the expense, the revenue, the financial analysis, to get to a final set of recommendations, which the township said, they would like by the end of the first quarter. So it's really to put a ribbon on the use activity, is what I'm thinking. Does that make
Well,
sense to everybody?
We're pretty close to that now, aren't we? Because
Well,
I thought we were giving ourselves till the end of January because all these other reports were coming in.
Well, like, we don't have a proposal from Spirit Golf. I think I'd like
Right,
to
those
see
are the
more detail
proposals.
on that. I'd like to see more detail from the real estate agents. And I think what we have is, and then we got to figure out how to best summarize that too. So
All right.
maybe you're right. Maybe we're getting close, or close. We're a lot closer. But right now, I kind of feel like we have just a list of everything, as opposed to here are the things that really, here are the few or a couple things that make the most sense. I don't
Okay.
know.
All right. Everybody think on it now. Have a good Thanksgiving. And we'll see you
Yeah,
on the
everybody
8th.
think on it. Jim, welcome. I think this is your first full
It
meeting.
is.
I know you were tortured by looking at some of these things.
Adjourn.
I make a motion to adjourn at 10:02 PM.
I second.
All in favor? All right. Okay.